But I did want to take a step back and examine where we are in this race and what the dynamic of it is. And obviously, the entire contest from the perspective of the political establishment, and that absolutely includes the establishment wings of both parties, has one objective and one objective only: to ensure that Donald Trump is not reelected president of the United States. And the fact that polls show that he's highly likely to be the Republican nominee, he's expected to win Iowa tonight by a very comfortable margin. We'll see how big it is. The only real question is, what will that margin be? The only other question is, who will come in second? Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, or perhaps Vivek Ramaswamy will have a very surprise result. And for me, it'll be interesting to see how Vivek does as well. But the clear dynamic of the race is that the elites in Washington and the political media class are desperate to do anything to stop Donald Trump, just like they were desperate to sabotage his presidency. And they will, I believe, do anything to prevent him from returning to power. And it's not very daring of a prediction, given that they are already prosecuting him criminally in 4 separate jurisdictions, trying to imprison him. They've already succeeded in 2 different states for now of getting him off the ballot, the Republican ballot. The Supreme Court will decide shortly whether or not he can be kept off the ballot. My strong guess is they will decide that he cannot be kept off the ballot, that he has to be on the ballot. But this is why they are melting down in a real panic. And knowing that they are held in such low esteem by the Republican Party voting base, liberals are nonetheless out of desperation, all but coming out and saying, please, please do your civic duty and vote for Nikki Haley. The New York Times editorial board, always with their finger on the pulse of right-wing politics and Republican Party populism, has an official editorial from the editorial board, the entire board, unsigned, out today, that's titled "The Responsibility of Republican Voters." It is the New York Times coming to Republican voters and saying, we're now going to give you a lecture on what your civic duty is as a Republican. And basically it has only one message: your highest patriotic duty is to do everything possible to ensure that Donald Trump is not your party's nominee. And this is their argument, quote, Trump has said that if elected, he will behave like a dictator on day one, and that he will direct the Justice Department to investigate his political rivals and his critics in the media. Now, let me just, if we can get the pen up here, I really just want to break that down quickly because I find it genuinely fascinating. So I think I've said before that one of the things that first alerted me to what a complete fraud and a joke Russiagate was when Trump stood in front of cameras and proclaimed, after he was asked about the Russians and whether they were interfering in the election, and he said, Russia, if you're listening, maybe you can find Hillary Clinton's missing emails. And it was so obviously a joke, a very Trump-like joke. He decided to take a question asked of him and mocked Hillary Clinton by saying, hey, well, if Russia is really all as powerful as you say, and they have all these hackers, maybe they could help us out and find those missing emails that she had. And the media decided to pretend that what they believed he was doing was issuing a genuine, earnest request to the Russians, to his allies in the Kremlin, to go and find Hillary Clinton's emails by hacking into her server and getting those missing emails, the ones that had been deleted. Now, you have to be the most imbecilic moron possible to believe that that was what Trump was doing, that if Trump were going to submit a illegal or improper request to the Russians to go and hack information about his opponent, that he would choose to do it in front of 6 cameras and in front of the entire world and all of the journalist corps that followed him around, as opposed to secretly meeting with a Russian representative in the parking lot and whispering to them that that's what he wanted. I mean, it was just so obviously a joke. And yet they decided to take that seriously, like that was really proof that he was aligned with the Russians, because look, now he was requesting that their hackers go and get information that he wanted. And I don't have very high regard for the intellect of the corporate press, and I never did, but no one is that stupid to actually believe that. They obviously thought the public was stupid enough to believe it, but the fact that they were willing to pretend that was so obviously meant as a very standard Trump joke was a serious request that was the smoking gun alerted me to just how broken their brains had become. And this is what they're doing now too. That Trump said that if elected, he will behave like a dictator on day one. What they're referring to there, and this is the first thing they're saying in the way of convincing Republicans they have the civic overarching duty not to allow Trump back into office, is he was on the Sean Hannity show. Sean Hannity said to him, who's a good friend of his, hey, Mr. Trump, people are saying that you're going to act like a dictator if you get back into office. And Trump said, only on the first day. Now after that, I'll be fine. And he was obviously joking. Why would he go and say that he's going to be a dictator, but only on the first day if he actually intends to go and be a dictator? And he made clear what he actually meant. He said, I'm going to issue executive orders for drilling and those sorts of things. And he was saying, oh, it's going to be like a dictator. I'm not going to wait for Congress. I'm going to use my power as the executive, under executive orders to do that. And then the media decided to pretend that Trump was promising to be a dictator. This now leads their case that it's too dangerous to let Trump back into the White House because even Trump has said he's going to be a dictator. This is how moronic these people are. And they just don't stop. I mean, you can make a case against Trump. I could. That's like serious and based in his policy failures or the people that he hired or the misalignment between what he promised he would do and what he actually did or his COVID management. You could make a lot of critiques of Trump. But to pretend that he had said that he's going to be a dictator, and then of course, the next one is the most ironic, and this one I actually think that they mean. The other reason why we can't let Trump back near power is because he has said that he will direct the Justice Department to investigate his political rivals. Now, how is it possible that the New York Times, which knows that it is cheering the attempt to put Trump into prison using the Biden Justice Department, a special prosecutor appointed by the Biden Justice Department who was overseeing his work, Jack Smith, has brought two separate cases charging Trump with felonies, one for the documents case of Mar-a-Lago, the other for his conduct after the 2020 election. The Democrats are actually trying to weaponize the Justice Department to put Donald Trump in prison, not just to investigate their political rivals, but to imprison them. It was just like in 2016 when they made such a big deal that Trump said, oh, we're going to investigate Hillary, we're going to put Hillary in prison. And then he was president for 4 years and never did that. The ones who actually are doing that are the Democrats, supported by the New York Times-led part of the media. And then they turn around and say the reason we can't have Trump in power is because he's going to weaponize the Justice Department to investigate his political rivals. It then goes on, declaring that the greatest danger to the nation comes, quote, not from abroad, but from within. Now that view, that the greatest danger to the nation comes not from abroad, but from within, is the current official position of the U.S. security state, that the greatest threat to American national security is not from Iran or China or Russia or Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Hezbollah or Hamas or the Houthis or the North Koreans. Instead, the greatest threat is from domestic extremists, right-wing domestic extremists. That is the official position of the U.S. security state. Everything they're accusing Trump of doing as the reason, as proof, that he's such a dangerous tyrant are the things they are actually doing and have been doing for quite some time. Quote, after leaving the White House, Mr. Trump refused repeated demands, including a grand jury subpoena to return classified materials to the government. As the government investigated, Mr. Trump called on Congress to defund the FBI and the Justice Department until they come to their senses. Oh no, not defund the FBI. Every good liberal knows that that is something that only people who hate America would do because the FBI is such a patriotic agency. Mr. Trump is now distinguished from the rest of the Republican candidates primarily by his contempt for the rule of law. The sooner he is rejected, the sooner the Republican Party can return to the difficult but necessary task of working within the system to achieve its goals. Now, obviously, they have no desire that Ron DeSantis be the nominee of the party either. And I promise you that if he were, this rhetoric would not go away. They would still warn that the Republican Party is fascist and white nationalist and dictatorial. The only way that the Republican Party in the eyes of the liberal establishment can return to being a responsible party that works within the system is that they do what they're told to nominate Nikki Haley. Because Nikki Haley and Joe Biden basically have no differences. They have trivial differences on the culture war. I mean, they have meaningful differences, but at the end of the day, looking at the power of the president when it comes to the culture war and the impact the presidency has on the culture war, these differences are, in the scheme of things, in terms of how power is dispersed, the thing they want you to focus on, they want you to think that everything is about the culture war. Because there is a difference between even Republicans like Nikki Haley and Democrats like Joe Biden, so it creates the illusion that there are differences. They have some differences about when the abortion right should be cut off, or LGBT rights on the margins, although I don't even think Nikki Haley and Joe Biden have differences on LGBT issues. So these are minor differences, but on foreign policy, Nikki Haley's a gigantic and vocal supporter of Biden's war in Ukraine, his war in Israel, his bombing of Yemen, his antagonism toward Beijing, the military encirclement of the Chinese with bases all over the place in their region. Nikki Haley approves of all of that. There'd be almost no debate to have. Here from NBC News, fears grow that Trump will use the military in, quote, dictatorial ways if he returns to the White House. Now, obviously, this is what you do if you know that you're losing debates on the merits, if nobody likes Joe Biden, if nobody feels like his policies are helping their lives. You try and scare people deeply about what will happen if Trump returns. And again, I said that this is a typical tactic. The problem is Trump was already president for 4 years. And whatever people dislike about him, I mean, people who aren't going to vote Democrat no matter what, people dislike about him, it's not because they think he was Hitler during the 4 years that he was in power. Here's what NBC says, quote, now bracing for Trump's potential return, a loose-knit network of public interest groups and lawmakers is quietly devising plans to try to foil any efforts to expand presidential power, which could include pressuring the military to cater to his political needs. Those taking part in the effort told NBC News that they are studying Trump's past actions and 2024 policy positions so that they will be ready if he wins in November. That involves preparing to take legal action and send letters to Trump appointees, spelling out consequences they'd face if they undermine constitutional norms. They quote this establishment Republican, William Cohen, as saying he's a clear and present danger to our democracy. He was the Clinton administration's defense secretary. You see what kind of Republican he is. What they're essentially saying is that the establishment is trying in advance to ensure that the agencies of the executive branch don't follow Trump or his orders if he wins and gets into the presidency. They actually did that during his first term as well. They frequently celebrated the people they called the adults in the room, like John Kelly and General Mattis and H.R. McMaster, who they believed should be celebrated because these are people undermining and subverting Trump's orders, like removing troops from Syria, constantly trying to thwart what Trump was doing with the right and power he won as president by virtue of being elected by the American people. They were proud of the fact that they were trying to get even the people who work for Trump inside the government to impede his orders and ignore them often and countervail them. As that is the definition of a deep state, just by the way, is a permanent power faction in Washington that rules no matter the outcome of elections and is there to backstop whatever values are most sacred to the establishment by not allowing even the elected president to issue orders that undermine them. That's what these people did, and now they're turning around and depicting themselves as the supreme guardians of American democracy. Here is an article in CNN that really illustrates the point to me. It's by John Avlon, who's one of those people who work at CNN. He's been around the media establishment forever. He and his wife once featured their $16.4 million townhouse in Lower Manhattan in the New York Times real estate section. And he's one of those guys who always prided himself on being a centrist, but like so many of them, is now singularly and monomaniacally defined by the attempt to ensure that Donald Trump cannot return to power. And here is John Avlon in CNN arguing why Trump singularly is beyond the pale. This is what he says, quote, "This is a time for choosing, as Ronald Reagan famously said, and the stakes have never been higher. It's always the case that the next election is the most important election ever. The stakes have never been higher. You must go and vote as the establishment tells you. In the nearly 250-year history of the United States, we've never had a major political party at high risk of choosing a nominee like this. Someone who, number one, routinely praises foreign dictators, and number two, is running on a frankly authoritarian platform. Never in our history have we had a president who praises dictators. Praising foreign dictators is the linchpin of American foreign policy in the wake of World War II. The strategy of American foreign policy in both parties since the end of World War II has been to go around the world and supporting and propping up dictators that are favorable to the United States in countries where public opinion opposes the American interest. That's why we have all these dictators in the Middle East who we love, like in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, in Jordan and Bahrain, in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. These are all dictators that the United States supports and loves and praises. They're close allies and partners. Whenever you hear people saying our close allies and partners in the Middle East, or even Arab countries want this or say this, they're talking about the dictators the United States has propped up. All those coups that we know about through the Cold War and then after are all instances where the United States was trying to install more pro-American figures than the figures that the people of the country democratically elected. That's what happened in Ukraine in 2014. The president that was elected became too friendly toward Moscow and too antagonistic to the EU in the eyes of the West, and so there was a coup that removed him from power prior to the expiration of his term under the Constitution. He was replaced by a much more pro-Western leader. We all heard the videotape of Victoria Nuland and the Ukrainian ambassador plotting how that was going to be done, picking the different leaders that they wanted, the ones who ended up in power. To claim that Trump is the only American president or nominee of a major party to ever praise dictators is such a childlike revision of American history, such a just blatant rewriting of the core reality of American politics that you have to be a sixth grader to believe in that. And then the second sentence, of course, is he's running on a frankly authoritarian platform. These are the same people who have installed a system of censoring the internet and purging it of dissent, who the United States Court of Appeals just 4 months ago ruled were guilty of one of the gravest attacks on the First Amendment, right of free speech, by coercing and threatening big tech companies to ban and punish any expression of dissent to their most sacred foreign policy orthodoxies. And these are the people who are trying to imprison their political leader, the one who's leading the polls to become president, trying to ban him from the ballot. And now they're saying, we've never had before a nominee of any party who ran on a frankly authoritarian platform. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.